Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about the Hardy-Weinberg equation. This will just help you kind of explain um, how this works. So literally there's two equations you need to remember. Okay, you need to remember, sorry, hang on. Okay, so you need to remember this equation and you need to remember this one. Okay? Now, what you also need to remember is we're talking here about one gene with two alleles. Okay? So what that means is here you get what we call heterozygous dominant, or you can, sorry, homozygous dominant, heterozygous, and homozygous recessive. Those are the three options. All right? So remember these two, I can actually draw that here, will have the same phenotype. Okay? This one will have a different phenotype. Okay? So, kind of, this was recorded on Halloween, so you can talk about like a widow's peak, like something like Dracula has. That's a recessive trait. So, only people with little a will have that trait. If you have kind of normal hair or non-widow's peak hair, might be a better way to say it, you could have either one of these. All right, so that's kind of the basics behind that. Now, what these equations basically represent, like in this example, P represents the dominant allele, Q represents the recessive allele. Okay? Um, and what these end up representing are, these two end up representing the frequency of occurrence in the population. Okay, so it's how often these occur. Now, knowing that and knowing that you have three possibilities here, you kind of end up with this combination. Okay, so p squared, because remember that's the frequency of having two of these, right? So p times p equals p squared. Q squared is the same idea. It's the frequency of having two of these together. So Q, right? Or Q times Q, if you remember your probability. So Q times Q, which equals Q squared. Same with P. So P equals P squared. Now, this one is the frequency of the heterozygous, right? And the kind of the math idea behind it is big A, little a could equal that, and or it could be little a, big A in that order. Genetics don't care, okay? Either one's fine. That's where that 2 in the front becomes from. Now we know P plus Q equals 1, right? So that's a probability, right? 1 represents 100% in a sense. You can't have 110% in this regard. And then this is also equal to 1 here, okay? So you can start to figure out things with these, knowing these, but this is what you need to know, okay? These are the two things that make everything else possible. The rest is just math. So if you don't understand these, you need to come back and watch this video again, okay? So looking at, we're going to skip the assumptions and things for the moment. So kind of looking at these examples, let's take a look at number 3 here. Okay? So the first part of any of these problems is figuring out what it wants to ask. So the allele for the hair pattern called widow's peak, this is the one I was talking about, is dominant over the allele for no widow's peak. Okay? So widow's peak in this case can equal P, right? In our things, but it's also, let's call that big A for now, because it's a dominant trait. And for the little one, it's little a. So, knowing that, then we know that little p is the probability of having the dominant allele, and Q is the probability of having a recessive allele. Okay, so the rest is just kind of deduction and figure this out. So we know there are 1,000 individuals. So that's why I put this right here. Okay? Now, of those 1,000 individuals, we know that 510 of them have widow's peak. Okay? And this is the part you need to be careful with. It threw me off the first time too. What that means is if you have widow's peak, it's dominant. So, big A, little a will give you widow's peak, and big A will give you widow's peak. Okay? So we're going back to that equation, right? It could be p squared or and 2pq. Both of those represent this number, okay? So we can't figure out what p or q are from this, okay? But what we can assume there, because we have either widow's peak or no widow's peak, is 490, right? Remember, that's 1,000 minus 510 equals 490, has no widow's peak. Now we know that no widow's peak is QQ, and we know that in this case, no widow's peak here is little a, that's the only option. So then we know that this is what we're looking for, right? So that is, we can work with. So that's what I've done here, is 490 over 100, because those are the numbers that have widow peaks. So going back up to the equation up here, we know the widow's peak is q squared, right? So that's what I've put right here. And we know for 90 divided by 1,000 is 0.49. Okay, so to get q, then I just need to take the square root of 0.49. That's 0.7, right? So q, another way to look at, is in the 70%, is in the pot, represents 70% of the alleles. 70% of them are q. Okay? Once I know that, and I remember that p plus q equals 1, p is very easy to figure out. 1 minus 0.7. Okay? So now, I've got two key things here. I've got q, and I've got p. Once I have those, the rest is really easy. So I know homozygous dominant is p squared, right? So 0.3 times 0.3 is 0.09. Heterozygous is 2 times p times q. So 2 times 0.7 times 0.3. And that equals 0.42 in the population. Okay? And then finally, q squared, which we already figured out because that was given to us, is 0.49. Okay? And so then from there, you can literally go 0.09 times 1,000 is going to be 90 people will have big A, right? 0.42 times 1,000 will be 4,200 people that will be big A, little a. And then finally, 0.49, we've already figured this out, but we can do it again, will be 490. And if you add those all up, that will be little a, little a. So if you add those all up, that should represent the population of 1,000 people. Okay? So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. The tricky part really with this is figuring out this part. But these problems are always have some solution like that. Okay? So give these other ones a try, and I'll put up the answers a little bit later. Okay? All right, thank you.